We come to this final chapter of Proverbs, the most memorable passage, no doubt, for most people. The final poem is 22 letters long about the valiant woman. It's an acrostic poem running in alphabetical order. And other acrostic poems we list here in Psalms and in Lamentations and Nahum and in the Jewish book Sirach. There's also important to point to an overlap with the book of Ruth, who's called a woman of valor or valiance, as this woman is twice, as is Ruth. Both women, we find, are instrumental in the life of the community. There are two parts to this chapter, and it's easy to overlook the first verses that concern King Lemuel's mother and the advice she gives to her son. It's a woman's voice to a king, which in the ancient world is unheard of. She's telling him how to reign and to correct his ways. She begins with three questions, which in the Hebrew could maybe be translated, what, or no, no, no. There's a sense of urgency for her. And she spells out two risks and one responsibility for Lemuel. The risks are women and wine, giving himself to pleasure. These are two of the most popular and the most dangerous temptations of the whole book. And it's at risk of ruining Lemuel's kingship. And the thing it distracts him from is his one responsibility that's repeated several times. Open your mouth for the poor, for the oppressed, for the destitute. It's his responsibility to speak for those who have no voice. And a king who's distracted by pleasures and desires will lose his life and his job. We turn now to that main section of Proverbs, the woman of valor or the valiant woman. Some translations call her excellent or noble. But we retain the word valor because it's used almost exclusively of warriors. Courage and strength and boldness that builds up and protects a nation. That's the kind of description that's being given to this woman. We begin by recognizing that this title of valor is for her work. Martin Luther, during the Reformation, was the first to read this chapter and recognize its affirmation of basic work, of the call of each human being to apply our hand at this world. We see here in this table a list of descriptions that create a chiasm or a structure that goes in and then back out to repeated sayings. Valiant, she's described at the beginning, and then her husband is named. And then the description of her putting her hands to her work and her palms that she grasps. And then she opens her palms again, hands and palms and hands. And then she stretches out her hands. It mentions her husband as it comes back to the end and reminds us that she is a valiant woman. The structure of the book, as it's been observed, starts in the home, moves out into the community, and ends again at home with the praise of children and husband. The woman has an ability to bring unity and life everywhere she goes in the society in which she lives. There's also the strong reference and emphasis on not just her hands, but her heart, her devotion, how she gives herself to her work. We read this in verses 13 and following. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing food from afar. She gets up while it is still night and she provides food for her family. She's seeking, she's eager, she travels, she provides. Her hands are busy at work. It's not simply that she labors, it's that she's got courage and devotion for her work, and she's committed to it. Vision and industry. In verse 16, we're told, she considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. It is an important passage. Wine, which in Proverbs most times signals the undermining of civilization, of the addiction of drunkards that creates unrest, that unravels a family, a life, and a society. But by planting a vineyard here in the final chapter, the woman shows us vision. She invests in her city. She has earnings from work she's done elsewhere, and she looks at a field, and she has the ability to see that it can grow crops. And the crops, wine, are used for families, but especially for feasting. And the fields themselves will be an arena for work, and labor for the very oppressed and the poor that King Lemuel is supposed to give attention to. It's a kind of remarkable civic vision in this woman's life. For Christians, we can think here of Jesus in the incarnation. It's significant in their theology that God becomes human. He takes on dust. He affirms the creation is good, which ought to send us with this woman to cultivate its goodness for itself, for those who work on it. She's a woman of faith and hope and love. Paul writes in the beginning of Colossians 1:5, and he thanks the Colossians for their faith, for their love for the saints, because of the hope that is in you. I've mentioned hope as a virtue in this chapter before because hope moves love forward. If you think about love as an action for another, hope needs to have a sense that something could get better. Hope can look at the world and see the potential for justice, for the healing of a family or a community or a school or a neighborhood. Verse 21 says, when it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She is clothed in strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. Her strength nurtures her in the world so that her love might go to work and be put into action. The fear of the Lord, the love of wisdom and of people, and the hope for the future give life and inspire us through this woman. Finally, the passage ends by reminding us that beauty and charm are fleeting and vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. This was one of Luther's great discoveries, that the fear of the Lord, that religious term about the way we give our devotion to life, here bears fruit in vocations. To his day, vocations had been simply used for priests and for clergy. And Luther begins what today lives on in secular and religious culture, calling. The calling to work in the world for good. And it's not charm or beauty that leads to work, but it's the Lord, it's religion that inspires her with her love and her vision for her community. It's easy to think and common that this passage is for women. It's used for Bible studies and books, and some of them quite remarkable. But we ought to bring this back to the context in chapters 1-9 and 31 in Proverbs. Woman wisdom was always beckoning to men to get wisdom. And those chapters in 1-9 with the wife or woman wisdom parallel distinctly chapter 31, as we've said before in earlier lessons. And we review that here. This woman in Proverbs 31, like the woman in chapters 1-9, is difficult to find. Both are more valuable than jewels. She has a staff of women that works for her in both cases. Both host meals. Both provide food and security. Both are known in the gates. Both sets are physically strong. Both are concerned with justice and care for the needy. Both laugh. And both fear the Lord. In other words, the women early in the book are meant to point forward to a vision of men and women embodying wisdom in their life. The feminist scholar Christine Roy Yoder describes it this way. This woman is what life looks like for those who accept wisdom's invitation to dwell in her household. For men and women, vocation and calling are in the community to the glory of God. Also in this woman, we get the celebration of ordinary work. In the ancient Greek world, in Plato and Aristotle and Socrates' day, the highest end of a human was contemplation. Those who labored were beneath the sages. They were necessary for life, but there wasn't true dignity in labor. Today, we're not far from that. The highest end of a person is a great college education, what I've called knowledge work, or others have described as knowledge work, where knowing is elevated above doing, where we have a great crisis in the trades. We lack plumbers, we lack welders, we lack those who work in technical fields with their hands, with their skills and fingers, bringing about products because of the way often that we've elevated certain kinds of work. I lead us here to words by Walter Civic. Walter Civic was a priest. In 1939, he was captured by the Polish during the German invasion of Poland and then sent off to Russia, to Siberia, to live almost 20 years in prison. As a priest, his religion was forbidden, and so he was given special work and labor. He dug, he built structures. His life for almost 20 years had little to do with his priesthood, but the ordinary fashion of things for people to live with and live around. And Civic comes at the end of that time and he returns to his life in the U.S. And he looks and he sees a parallel between his life and that of Jesus, who did not come as an academic, but as one simple in the trades. He says, he did not fashion benches or tables or plow beams by means of miracles, but by hammer and saw and by axe and adze. He worked long hours to help his father and then became the support of his widowed mother by the rough work of the hill country craftsman. His hands are engaged in the creation, and he can sympathize with our weaknesses. Civic goes on to say, he did the work all of us have to do in our lifetimes. There is little we can say about the jobs we do or have done that could not be said of the work God himself did when he became man. Finally, this chapter in wisdom holds together the secular and the sacred, things we often pull apart. We have our religious life on Sunday, but then I go about my secular life, my leisure, my work, my other time. But this woman, as the fear of the Lord at the end of the chapter reminds us, this is what the fear of the Lord looks like. This is religion, beautiful work, community, family, habits, and pastimes. We're reminded in the incarnation that when Christ became flesh, he didn't just redeem souls or human beings, but all things are in him and through him and for him. Christians are reminded that we are priests in the world. We bring creation, sanctification by our work alongside God and with him in our presence. And as a concluding thought, what she does in her work tells us something about the nature of work. The common phrase, do what you love, finds a strong contrast here in a woman who loves work, who loves her work and loves her neighbor through her work. The contrast one is finding the end in work, and the work being the avenue, the means for which our love gives life to ourselves, to others, to the community. She is, as we come to the end of Proverbs, that vision of worlds of vices at risk and falling apart, and yet somebody living in wisdom, in the fear of the Lord, bringing wholeness and fruitfulness to the whole of life and community.